So Alex Jones has been having a rough go of it recently. He's engaged in about 412 different lawsuits. And of course, the big one is the Sandy Hook cases. So I'm sure all of you know the backstory, but just to give you the Cliff Notes version of it. Alex Jones, originally, when the Sandy Hook mass shooting happened, he went out on his show and he said, in no uncertain terms, effectively, this thing is a false flag or it's a hoax and they're using crisis actors. And he said it over and over and over and over. And what happened is his most rabid viewers and supporters, they took matters into their own hands. And some of them found where the Sandy Hook families lived and they would harass them and, say, you're in on the biggest hoax and stuff like that. And of course, these people having just lost their kids, I mean, they flipped and they were like, this is ridiculous. And so they ended up taking him to court. I'm not sure exactly I'm not sure if it was libel or slander or defamation or whatever the charges were, but they took him to court on that. Now, Alex Jones actually didn't lose on the merits of that. He didn't. He lost by default, which means he didn't even provide the documents to the court that he was required by law to provide. And so, in a weird way, it actually is the best ending because there is no precedent that's set. Here's the thing. As much as I hate Alex Jones, as much as what he did on Sandy Hook is grotesque and disgusting, he never went out there personally and doxed these people or said, I think you should go do targeted harassment of these people or called for violence or anything like that. And so if he did that, then he would be guilty of those things. But he didn't do that. And so it was like leaps of logic made by his own audience to go ahead and do the targeted harassment. And so I think those people need to go to jail because they're the ones who actually broke the law. Now, so if you found Alex guilty on it, it sets a bad free speech precedent. It does. Now, having said that, I don't want no accountability here because what he did is disgusting and it should be disincentivized in the future. So the case went, in my opinion, the best it could have possibly went because he didn't provide the documents. He was found guilty by default. And that's rare, by the way. But what that means is he might end up having to pay these people some money. So having said that, look at this new gross trick that he's engaged in. Take a look. So this is in Mediaite. They say Alex Jones transferred over $18 million to shell companies to hide assets from Sandy Hook victims, court filing alleges. Far-right conspiracy theorist Alex Jones is being accused of transferring millions of dollars out of InfoWars accounts and into shell companies in an apparent gambit to avoid paying victims of the Sandy Hook massacre who are suing him. Will Sommer reports that in a motion filed Wednesday, the family suing Jones claim he has worked to hide InfoWars assets and deceptively made the company appear to be on the verge of bankruptcy. Let's go to the next one. Jones is being sued for defamation by the families of some of the 20 children and 6 teachers, so there you go, it's defamation, killed in the 2012 school shooting after Jones claimed that the shooting had never happened and suggested it was a false flag operation. A judge recently found Jones liable for damages, and a trial is set for August to determine how much he should pay the families. The family's motion, filed in Texas, alleges Jones has doomsday prepped his finances to avoid paying damages in the future. On paper, InfoWars parent company Free Speech Systems, hilarious name, seems to lose money every year. Sommer writes in the Daily Beast. Sommer continues breaking down some of the figures surrounding Jones' lucrative business. Quote, yet Jones has allegedly transferred significant amounts of the company filed transactions that often coincide with legal setbacks Jones has faced in the Sandy Hook cases. After the family sued him in 2018, for example, Jones allegedly started personally withdrawing a total of $18 million from the Free Speech Systems bank account over 3 years, along with withdrawing an annual $600,000 salary. Summers goes on to explain the suspicious transfers go to a company called PQPR, quote, which the plaintiffs claim is controlled by Jones and his family members. Shortly after Jones lost his last appeal to block the defamation cases in Texas, PQPR claimed the Free Speech Systems owed it $54 million among all of InfoWars assets, Sommer adds, noting where and how all of InfoWars assets have suddenly left their books. Classic Alex Jones. A deeply, deeply sleazy trick, trying to protect his assets at the last minute from, being on the table in this case so that when they get a payout, you got a bigger pool of money to pull from. Now, we covered a story recently. I believe he offered, I think it was like $112,000 or $120,000 per family. And they said no. They said no, and they, are, I guess, taking him to court for a much bigger settlement than that. But this does not surprise me in the least. Actually, what does slightly surprise me is that he wasn't, he didn't approach his business differently from the beginning. There's different legal filings for businesses. And if you do, I think it's called an LLC, limited liability company or limited liability corporation. then if there is some sort of lawsuit, they can only pull from that money, and his own personal and private assets are separate. I'm not sure he had a filing like that in place. So it's possible there was more money on the table for these people to get. And he did in such a clunky way and such an obvious way at the last minute. He's like, oh, shoot, I could lose everything. And so he's trying to, hide his money and use different shell companies. I mean, we covered a story where Alex Jones was literally begging, quote, big donors to give money to InfoWars because of the cases. And this is a guy, mind you, even though he's been banned from like every single social media platform, which, by the way, is not something I agree with, just to be clear, he still makes a tremendous amount of money through his online store. In fact, I forget the exact number, but let me go ahead and pull it up, because I remember when I read it, I was like, good googly moogly, this guy makes way more money than I thought he made. Alex Jones InfoWars store millions. Let me see what comes up when I type that in. In Rolling Stone, Alex Jones InfoWars store raked in $165 million over 3 years, selling supplements and prepper gear. Financial records obtained by the Huffington Post reveal the conspiracy theorist was cashing in big as he spread lies about the Sandy Hook massacre. So he was okay. This is the state of affairs, and he was begging, quote, big donors for money to keep the operation going. Stop and think about that. Stop and think about that. And he's trying to hide the money at the last minute to make sure that they get none of it. Now, look, I'm not a legal expert. I'm not a judge. I'm not a lawyer. I honestly don't know what the correct answer is in terms of what the punishment should be. I think there should be some punishment because what he did was beyond egregious. But again, I do think him losing by default was a better scenario than him actually losing on the merits of the defamation case, because that might have been a little bit of a stretch on the defamation front because he didn't directly dox them or harass them or anything like that. But it is as sleazy as it gets, man. It is as sleazy as it gets. We shall see. In fact, let me ask you guys make a prediction. Make a prediction for me. Go ahead and tell me in the comment section what you think ultimately he'll have to pay each of the families. Because again, they rejected something that was around the $120,000 mark. He's clearly panicking at the last minute and trying to get a lot of the assets off the books. I think that any judge who's looking at this case now after the fact is going to know all these things. They're going to know about the $165 million over 3 years. They're going to know about the begging big donors for money. They're going to know about, the way he's trying to hide it, and that might even factor into the decision making. So, I mean, listen, this part is speculation. It absolutely is possible that this could bankrupt Alex Jones and take down InfoWars. But honestly, I highly doubt it, and here's why. Remember that guy, Jim Baker? He's a televangelist, very famous. He was huge for a while, probably back in like the 80s. And then he ended up going to jail for fraud and all sorts of shit. Homeboy gets out of prison and is like immediately on, a very comfy looking studio set, preaching the same shit about, being a lover of Jesus and the end times are coming and all that stuff. And immediately back to making scam sales too. He's selling that prepper food. That shit has to be the grossest food in the world. Like, it's supposed to be for when the apocalypse comes and Armageddon comes and end times comes and you're down there in a bunker and you got like mashed potatoes that were made in 1989 that you reheat and somehow it's supposed to stay good. But anyway, point is, homeboy went right back to doing the same shit he was doing before and it was like nothing happened. And, you get the sense Alex Jones, no matter what happens, he's going to find a way to claw himself back. And we'll see. But anyway, guys, throw up the thing that you were talking about there. I just heard. The Sandy Hook plaintiffs accused Jones of using an alphabet soup of shell entities to hide his assets, an apparent reference to PQPR. Their transfer is designed to siphon off Jones's assets to make them judgment-proof, the lawyers allege in the motion. So, look, it is possible that the trickery he's engaged in here, maybe it'll work legally. Because if I know anything, I know that our legal system is biased in a way where rich people can shield their assets very effectively if they know what they're doing. They have a team of experts and lawyers, and they could figure out ways that are legal but shouldn't be legal to get away with this stuff. So it is possible that he'll just get away with all of it, or he'll just get a tiny little slap on the wrist that functionally is nothing for him. But at least now you know the ins and the outs and the specifics of how he's trying to shield his assets and hide it from scrutiny. And again, I guess it'll depend on the judge. I guess it'll depend on what the maximum penalties are, but we'll have to wait and see what the ultimate judgment is and how much each of the families are getting. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal Kyle and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.